Sometimes a person disappears from your life, yet somehow never leaves your mind. Years pass. You meet new people. You build new routines. Entire chapters of your life change. And still, something about them remains. A song suddenly reminds you of them. A random phrase brings back a conversation you haven't thought about in years. You see someone who looks vaguely familiar, and for a split second, your mind travels backward. The strange part is that it isn't always the person you loved the most. It isn't always your closest friend. It isn't always the relationship that lasted the longest. Sometimes the people who stay in your mind for years are the ones who were never fully yours to begin with. And that raises an uncomfortable question. Why do certain people become unforgettable while others fade almost completely away? Most people think the answer is emotional attachment, but that's only the surface. Something much deeper is happening beneath it, something that has less to do with the other person than you might imagine. And once you see it, you'll begin to understand why some faces, some voices, and some memories seem immune to time itself. Because the people who stay in your mind the longest often leave something unfinished inside you. At first, this sounds simple. Maybe the relationship ended unexpectedly. Maybe you never got closure. Maybe things ended with unanswered questions. But here's where it gets interesting. Many people experience unfinished relationships, yet only a few become lifelong mental residents. Only a few continue appearing in dreams years later. Only a few continue influencing decisions long after they've disappeared. The reason is hidden in the way the human mind handles uncertainty. Think about a movie that ends before revealing the final scene. Your brain wants completion, it wants resolution, it wants the missing piece. When it doesn't get it, part of your attention remains attached. Psychologists have observed this tendency repeatedly. Incomplete experiences often remain more mentally active than completed ones. And nowhere is this more powerful than in human relationships. Imagine someone you were beginning to know. The connection felt promising. The conversations flowed naturally. You started imagining where things might go. Then suddenly, without warning, they pulled away. No explanation, no dramatic ending, just distance. Most people never realize that what hurts isn't only the loss, it's the interruption of possibility. The future you imagined never had a chance to prove itself right or wrong. So your mind keeps revisiting it, not because it was necessarily perfect, but because it remained unfinished. Yet that's only the first layer. The deeper truth is that some people stay in your mind because they activated parts of yourself that were already waiting to be discovered. This is where the real psychology begins. Many relationships are not just connections between two people. They're mirrors. They reveal hidden aspects of who we are. You may have met someone who made you feel unusually confident, someone who made you laugh differently, someone who made you feel understood in ways others never had. When they left, you didn't just lose them. You lost access to a version of yourself that existed around them. And that's why forgetting becomes difficult, because every memory of them is also a memory of who you were. A man may spend years thinking about a woman from his past, not because she was perfect, not because she was his soulmate, but because she represented a version of himself that felt alive, hopeful, and fearless. Without realizing it, he misses the feeling more than the person. Very few people notice this distinction, and it changes everything. The same thing happens in friendships. You may remember an old friend long after the friendship ends, not because of what they said, not because of specific events, but because they existed during a period of your life that carried a certain energy, a certain identity, a certain sense of possibility. The friend becomes psychologically linked to that version of yourself. and every memory acts like a doorway. Yet something even more surprising happens. Sometimes the people who stay in your mind aren't the people who loved you. They're the people who challenged you, the people who confused you, the people who triggered emotions you didn't fully understand. At first glance, this seems strange. Why would difficult people occupy so much mental space? Because emotional intensity creates psychological weight. Your mind pays attention to what feels significant, not necessarily what feels pleasant. Think about a workplace interaction. Perhaps there was a colleague who constantly competed with you. You didn't particularly like them. Yet years later, you still remember them. Why? Because they activated emotions, comparison, frustration, ambition, doubt. The mind remembers what moves it, and emotional movement creates memory. But here's what nobody tells you. The strongest memories are often connected to contradiction. Someone was kind but unpredictable, loving but distant, interested but unavailable, supportive but mysterious. Your brain struggles to organize contradictions. It prefers consistency. When people behave in ways that don't fit a clear pattern, your mind keeps returning to them, searching for answers. This explains why some relationships become almost impossible to forget. You were never able to place them neatly into a category. You never fully understood them. And uncertainty creates obsession far more effectively than certainty. Social media has amplified this phenomenon dramatically. Years ago, people disappeared. Today, they remain visible. A photo appears, a story appears, a mutual friend mentions them. Their existence continues to brush against your awareness. The connection may be gone, but the psychological loop remains active. That's when something unexpected happens. Your mind begins filling in the blanks. You imagine their life. You imagine what they're thinking. You imagine whether they remember you. The actual person slowly becomes less important than the version your imagination creates. And that version can become remarkably powerful. Carl Jung touched on something related to this when discussing projection. Human beings often place unconscious hopes, fears, desires, and ideals onto other people. In other words, we don't always see people as they are. We see them partly as they are, and partly as symbols. This is where things become revealing. Sometimes the person who stays in your mind for years is carrying pieces of a story that actually belongs to you. A woman may represent freedom. A man may represent safety. A friend may represent belonging. A former partner may represent a road not taken. Without realizing it, the mind attaches meaning to the person, and meaning lasts longer than memory. That's why two people can experience the exact same relationship and remember it completely differently. One moves on quickly. The other thinks about it for decades. The relationship wasn't necessarily different. The meaning attached to it was. And meaning has extraordinary power over memory. But the most unforgettable people aren't always connected to love, attraction, or loss. Sometimes they're connected to identity itself. Because every human being has a public self and a hidden self, a persona we show the world, and parts of ourselves we rarely reveal. Then someone appears who somehow sees beyond the performance. They notice something genuine, something vulnerable, something real, and for a brief period, you feel deeply understood. That experience leaves a mark unlike almost anything else. Because being understood satisfies one of the deepest psychological needs humans possess. Yet even this isn't the deepest reason some people remain in your mind. There is one layer beneath all of this. One hidden mechanism that explains why certain people become almost impossible to forget. It's not attachment. It's not attraction. It's not even unfinished business. Those are only symptoms. The real reason is far more surprising, and once you understand it, you'll realize that the people who stay in your mind for years may never have been there because of who they were. They stayed because of what they awakened. And what they awakened is something most people spend their entire lives trying to understand. Because what they awakened was never truly about them. It was about a hidden part of you, a part that existed long before they arrived and continued long after they left. This is the insight most people spend years missing. When someone remains in your mind for an unusually long time, the mind is rarely holding on to the person alone. It is holding on to a psychological experience. And experiences that touch the deepest layers of identity don't disappear easily. Think about how memory actually works. Your mind does not store every detail equally. You don't remember every conversation you've ever had. You don't remember every face you've ever seen. You don't remember every compliment, every argument, every ordinary day. Memory is selective. It keeps what feels meaningful. And meaning is created when an experience connects to something already living inside you. This is why two people can walk into the same room and leave with completely different memories. One person forgets the encounter within days. The other thinks about it for years. The event wasn't different. The internal meaning was. Most people search for answers in the external world. They ask, why can't I forget them? What made them so special? Why do they still affect me? But the answer is often pointing inward. A person became memorable because they touched something that was already waiting to be touched. Sometimes it is a hidden desire. Sometimes it is an unmet need. Sometimes it is a forgotten dream. Sometimes it is a wounded part of the self. And this changes everything. Because it means the people who stay in your mind are often acting as psychological messengers. They reveal something important about your inner world, something you may not have fully understood before meeting them. Consider a man who cannot stop thinking about a relationship that ended years ago. At first, he assumes he misses the woman. But as he reflects more honestly, he realizes something surprising. What he truly misses is how ambitious he felt during that period, how alive he felt, how much possibility he saw in his future. The relationship became attached to a version of himself he doesn't want to lose. The memory survives because it protects an identity. Or imagine a woman who still thinks about a friendship that quietly faded away. What keeps returning isn't the friend. It's the feeling of being accepted without having to perform, without having to impress, without having to hide. The friendship became symbolic, and symbols are incredibly difficult to forget. This is why the answer is more uncomfortable than most expect. Sometimes we spend years trying to recover a person when what we're really searching for is a missing piece of ourselves. And until we recognize that distinction, the mental loop continues. But here's where things become even more fascinating. The people who stay in your mind often reveal your unconscious priorities. Not the priorities you claim to have, the priorities you actually carry. Very few people notice this. A person may say they value stability, yet they keep thinking about someone unpredictable. Another may say they want peace, yet they remain obsessed with someone emotionally intense. Why? Because the conscious mind and the unconscious mind are not always in agreement. Carl Jung believed that much of human behavior is influenced by forces operating beneath awareness. And whether someone knows Jung or not, most people have experienced this reality. You've probably met someone and felt unusually drawn to them without understanding why. You've probably felt strangely affected by someone who wasn't even your type. You've probably remembered someone long after logic suggested you shouldn't. The reason is hidden beneath the surface. The unconscious recognizes things before the conscious mind understands them. Sometimes it sees qualities you secretly admire. Sometimes it sees wounds that feel familiar. Sometimes it sees possibilities that haven't yet been lived. That's why certain encounters feel bigger than they should, because they're connected to psychological material far older than the relationship itself. Yet there is another layer that explains why some people become unforgettable. The human mind is deeply attracted to transformation. We remember people who changed us, not necessarily because they intended to, not necessarily because they were extraordinary, but because life looked different after meeting them. Think about the people you've forgotten. Many were perfectly pleasant. Many treated you well. Many caused no problems at all. Yet their memory faded naturally. Now think about the people who stayed. Something shifted because of them. Maybe they challenged your assumptions. Maybe they forced you to grow. Maybe they exposed a weakness. Maybe they awakened a strength. Maybe they changed the direction of your life. Transformation leaves fingerprints on memory, and the greater the transformation, the deeper the imprint. This is why some individuals continue living in your thoughts decades later, not because they remain present, but because their impact remains present. The mind follows impact, not proximity, not time. Impact. And that's when many people make a crucial mistake. They assume that remembering someone means they still belong in their future, but memory and destiny are not the same thing. Someone can be important without being permanent. Someone can change your life without staying in it. Someone can matter deeply without being meant to return. This truth is difficult because the human mind loves unfinished stories. It wants reunions. It wants second chances. It wants explanations. It wants endings that feel satisfying. Reality doesn't always provide them, and yet growth often begins when we stop demanding closure from other people. Because here's what nobody tells you. Closure is rarely something another person gives. It's something you eventually create. The moment you understand what the experience was trying to teach you, part of its power changes. The memory remains, but the grip loosens. The person remains significant, but they stop controlling your attention. The lesson replaces the longing, and that shift is incredibly freeing. What happens next explains everything. When you finally identify what the person awakened inside you, you no longer need them to carry it. If they awakened confidence, you can cultivate confidence yourself. If they awakened courage, you can strengthen courage yourself. If they awakened creativity, purpose, belonging, or hope, those qualities can become yours independently. The psychological dependence begins to dissolve, and suddenly, something remarkable happens. You stop seeing them as the source. You start seeing them as the trigger. The source was always within you. They simply revealed it. This is where the real psychology reaches its deepest point. The most unforgettable people often become mirrors of unrealized potential. They show us who we could become. They reveal strengths we hadn't trusted. They expose fears we hadn't faced. They illuminate parts of ourselves hidden in shadow. And that is why they remain so vivid. Not because they possessed something magical, but because they activated something meaningful. Years later, the mind still remembers because the lesson is still alive. The growth is still unfolding. The transformation is still happening. And perhaps that's the final irony. We spend so much time wondering why certain people stay in our minds. We assume the mystery belongs to them. But the mystery was never entirely about them. It was about us. About the unfinished parts of ourselves. About the hidden desires beneath our choices. About the identities waiting to emerge. About the qualities we recognize through another human being. The people who stay in your mind for years are often not reminders of what you lost. They are reminders of what you discovered. And once you understand that, something changes. You stop chasing ghosts. You stop fighting memories. You stop demanding answers from the past. Instead, you begin listening to what those memories are trying to reveal. Because every unforgettable person leaves behind a question. Not, why did they leave? Not, do they still think about me? Not, will they come back? The deeper question is, what part of me came alive when they appeared? And if you can answer that honestly, you may discover that the people who stayed in your mind for years were never there to remain forever. They were there to introduce you to yourself. And perhaps that's why truly unforgettable people feel so different from everyone else. Long after their voice is gone, long after their presence disappears, long after the story ends, they continue echoing through your life. Not because they are still holding on to you, but because a piece of the person you are becoming first revealed itself through them. And once a human being helps you see a deeper version of yourself, forgetting them becomes almost impossible. Because in a strange way, remembering them is also remembering who you are.